Welcome back to The Tangent. Today we're going to do a quick little topic on book series.
Yeah.
Just some random good books that we enjoyed reading ourselves. We're going to go ahead and start with actually a favorite amongst the three of us.
Yeah, we should probably point out we're going to try and not double over other books we've already talked about.
Right.
So that's the reason why we're going to start in this kind of weird series that a lot of you probably haven't heard of or read.
But we all agree is absolutely amazing and worth the read. I would say it's probably my favorite book series that I've read.
So go ahead and tell them what it is.
It is called the Gentleman Bastards series. And as far as I know, there are 4 books out.
There's 3, and then there's that prequel novella.
Right.
Which I have not read the prequel
I haven't read the prequel
neither
yet.
have I. I've only just read the 3.
But there's supposed to be a fourth book within the main story.
The fourth book is supposed to... the fourth book was supposed to already be out, but it's been delayed several times now.
Yeah. Do we know why it was delayed?
Because it's a book?
Well, I don't think there's a concrete reason as to why it's being delayed. At least at the least.
Probably the same reason why Patrick Rothfuss's book is being delayed.
Yeah, I've just noticed that asking why is pointless whenever you're waiting for that next. Because
there's so many book series out there that I'm so just waiting for that next book to come out, and I keep looking. When's that release date? And they're like, oh, the release date was a year ago. I was like, well, then where's the book?
Right. But anyways, we've already gone off on a tangent. We're 30 seconds in. Back to the Gentleman Bastards series.
Oh my gosh.
We want to do a synopsis.
I'll let you guys go.
Can we do a synopsis?
We can do one, but it might have some spoilers.
We might be able to do a synopsis for the first book, The Lies of Locke Lamora.
The Lies of Locke Lamora.
Locke Lamora.
So basically, the main character's name is Locke Lamora,
and the book is about his lies.
Right.
So
podcast over.
Basically, Locke Lamora and I always forget his name.
Jean Tannen.
Jean. They are. I just had the word.
They're
thieves.
To preface why it's called the Gentleman Bastards series, they were, kids that were raised in poor old England, and I don't even.
Is it even based in England?
No, it is a complete fantasy world.
Yeah, it's all based on a different planet, isn't it?
It's a complete fantasy world.
Okay, well,
but it does remind me a lot of things like a sort of fantasy old England.
Right. Yeah. Right. So that's probably where you get that from.
But it's actually more like a fantasy European continent.
Right.
Because they talk about the continent and the island nations. It's all a bunch of city states.
So they were
There's a little bit of magic in there.
There's a fair amount of magic because they use a lot of alchemy. They talk about false light, which is the alchemical street lights that come on after dark. Right. Yeah. And they stay on for an hour.
Yeah. Well, and then the further you get into the series, the more of that you see too. Yeah. Yes. Specifically in the third book, there's a lot, and hinting at just completely diving deeper into stuff like that as the series is going to continue.
Different colored flames, because the third book's about them doing that play, isn't it?
Well, the play happens in the third book, but they also do the 5-year game.
That's right. That's right. It's been a minute since I've actually read it.
So the first book goes over Locke Lamora and Jean Tannen and their gang. They live in a city called Camor, which is filled with gangs. Camor is a city-state that is known for being extremely ruthless and vengeful, and basically it doesn't matter who you are. Camoris have a stereotype about them where they will get vengeance basically at any cost.
Right.
And so the whole city is separated into basically 3 factions. You got the rich people, the thieves, and then just your normal folk that get taken advantage by everybody.
By the rich people and the thieves.
By the rich people and the thieves. So the city itself is run by a duke, and the secondary duke basically is the Kappa, he runs all the thieves. So the different gangs are run by guristas, and the guristas all basically bend the knee to the Kappa.
Right.
Locke is the barista of his gang, the Gentlemen Bastards. And they specialize in false facing, which is basically their professional con artists.
Oh yeah. It's great. And it's so great.
And Locke is one of the best, if not the best, con artist I think I've ever read in any book.
Yeah, in any series. And so the cool thing about the series in general for me was like they kept going back to kind of give you backstory on like what's relevant at the point in time.
You can't skip the intro to the Lies of Locke Lamora because it's really important because the intro was the boy who stole too much, which is like how he starts becoming a thief, where he gets sold to the thief maker and steals from the Yellow Jackets, and you know.
Yeah,
it goes over
who he is.
It goes over the fact that when he was a kid, he stole so much and was such a troublemaker that the other thieves thought it might be better if he was just murdered and thrown into the ocean.
Right. Well, and it shows how him and Jean became what the good friends that they are. Like Jean is a big kid that like doesn't talk a whole lot. He's kind of quiet and kept to himself.
Locke grew up as a thief, but Jean grew up as a normal kid. His parents were merchants. Right. He was a merchant's kid, so he's a bit bigger. He's really good with numbers.
Oh yeah.
He wears glasses.
Yeah.
But his temper is the shortest freaking fuse ever. Whatever sets him off, he is going to town.
Oh yeah.
On whoever makes him mad.
And the thing that sets him off the most is probably anything to do with Locke Lamora.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't mess with
Locke, or you're gonna get
you're gonna end up having to deal with Jean.
So Locke and we should also point out that in most stories, your hero is some brave guy who is really strong, and Locke is a con artist through and through. He can't fight worth a damn. He is a terrible swordsman. He outright says the only way he's getting a knife into somebody is if it's in their back. Like he's
he's out there about it. He doesn't care.
I mean, Locke even says multiple times that he's not the greatest fighter. Mm-hmm. He can hold his own, but he's not a great swordsman, and he's definitely not a fighter.
He fights with skullduggery and tricks.
He's like Ratbag.
He will con his way through a fight. Much less con his way through a theft.
For Locke Lamora, the reason why for me I would consider him probably the greatest con artist in any kind of fictional series that I've come across is because there were plenty of points while reading through it the first time where I didn't know if what was going on was legit or just a con.
Yeah,
and you get the insider on everything that's happening, but at the same time, I'm sitting there like, wait, is this for real? Holy crap, are they doing this? And then,
I love the little backstory because they do these interludes where they go back in time again and show you more of when the Gentlemen Bastards were young, and the war with the Half Crowns when they were all kids, and so there was another gang called the Full Crowns, and their initiates were their kids called the Half Crowns. And the Half Crowns was a big gang of kids, and they got into fights with the Gentlemen Bastards. And there was only like 4 or 5 Gentlemen Bastards.
Yeah,
right?
They're a small.
They're a very small gang. So the Half Crowns are beating the crap out of them, except Jean Tannen was a professionally trained fighter by this point.
Yeah, because he gets sent away. Yeah, he got sent away to learn to fight.
He could beat up like 4 or 5 of the Half Crowns at a time. Yeah. So anytime the Half Crowns saw Jean, they would run away. But because he's a bigger kid, he can't run after them. So one day, Locke just gets super mad at the fact that he got his ass kicked. And he's like, screw this. Jean, bust out the sewing needle. We're going to kick the crap out of the head of the Half Crowns. And so what he does is he sits alone in this alley and waits for the head of the Half Crowns to show up. And then he has an extra sleeve sewn onto his sleeve, which he wraps around the other kid and ties them together. And the kid's just beating the crap out of him. And he's like, what the hell you think you're doing, Lamora? I'm just going to beat the tar out of you. He's like, I don't have to beat you. I just have to hold you here until Jean gets here.
Yeah, I remember. And they were telling the story.
The slow motion boat scene where Jean is coming up on the boat, and the dude freaks out. And he's like, "Let me go! Let me go! Let me go!"
Yeah, Yeah, he's hitting him even harder.
You just hear about Jean just rowing this boat to shore, and it's like Locke's just sitting there. I just gotta hold out until he gets here.
Yeah, it illustrates just how awesome of a character Locke is.
Locke will win with skullduggery and tricks. He will not. He's not a physical guy.
He'll win by losing.
Yeah, he can win by losing. It's
right,
great.
Absolutely. So, did we get... I don't think we actually said the author's name. Do we know the author's name?
I'm drawing a blank right now.
I can look up the author's name here real
because if we're going to tell everybody about this book and tell them to go read it, the author is kind of important.
Agreed.
So...
I have a book to bring up next.
Scott Lynch.
Scott Lynch.
And Lynch. Book 1 is The Lies of Locke Lamora. Book 2 is... Honestly, it's probably my favorite of the three.
Book 2 is probably my favorite also. Red Seas Under Red Skies.
Oh, yeah.
That is such a good book.
Yeah.
And then Republic of Thieves being the third. The
Republic of Thieves is not my favorite of the books, but it does have my favorite line, which I told you yesterday, James. It's if they figure it out, we'll just give them the universal apology. What's the universal apology? I was gravely misinformed. I'm sorry for this misunderstanding. Here, fuck off with this bag of money.
And they literally use the F word. So, for those of you who are listening to this, who are under a certain age, there's a lot of curse words in this book.
A lot of cursing in this book.
They do a lot of cursing in this book. So, if there are curse words that come out and us talking about these books, that is because they come from the books.
Listener's discretion is advised.
They're
reader's discretion. Either one.
This is a great series.
It is not a young adult series.
No, but if you really like...
There's not like a bunch of gratuitous sex or anything. It's just language and some violence. A lot of violence. People get eaten by sharks and things.
If you really like to read a book about a hero that's not truly one of them, like Knights of the Round Table
heroes... He's not even really a hero. He's technically a bad guy. He's just a nice-ish bad guy.
Right. Yeah. So if you want to... I say hero, but if the main character is not your typical hero.
I can't even call him an anti-hero because his goals aren't...
the protagonist.
His goals aren't good.
So, if you really like that a change in your protagonist style, protagonist of the book being maybe a bad guy instead of a good guy, this is a great series.
Honestly, anybody over the age of 18, I don't care whether you're looking for something like that or not, I would recommend it to you because it's like
even if you don't like fantasy stuff, if you like heist stuff, heist movies, this is a great heist thing. It's a great mobster thing.
And they keep you
in the dark. And if you do like fantasy, it's great fantasy too.
They keep you in the dark so well that they keep you guessing throughout all three of the books.
Yeah, all three of the books. Yeah.
We're going to move on. Harrison said he has a book he wants to recommend, which is really rare. So we're going to let Harrison
go.
Silence.
All right. So this book is about it's kind of like Home Alone in a way, I guess. If you
okay.
All right.
So like there's these kids that are home alone, right? And then eventually the stranger just kind of shows up.
All right.
It gets kind of weird. This book is
Cat in the Hat.
Is this Cat in the Hat?
It is.
Oh my gosh!
It's Cat in the Hat.
It's
Dr. Seuss.
Hell yeah!
It's a really long series of books. I'm not sure I could get through them all.
Yeah,
there's quite a bit.
Redfish,
green eggs and ham.
Green eggs and ham. Yeah.
Green eggs and ham.
He's got a whole book about feet.
Yeah.
Dude, hell yeah! Redfish, bluefish.
Yeah, such a great
he's got an entire book about racism.
Fox in the Socks or whatever.
Horton Hears a Who.
Horton Hears a Who.
Right, responsibility and racism. That's basically Dr. Seuss in a nutshell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, responsibility and racism. I think
Anyway, now that we put out Dr. Seuss,
you're hilarious.
Here. Yes, you are absolutely hilarious.
Is that why you were laughing? He just started laughing to himself like five minutes ago or so, and we're just like staring at him like, the heck is he laughing about?
Yeah.
And that's hilarious.
There's another very obscure book that I think all three of us have read, because I'm pretty sure you read it too and really enjoyed it. Are you talking
about the Empire of Thorns or the Thorn Empire or whatever? I was thinking about that as we were talking about this, and like I have to reread that. I enjoyed it, but like there.
Okay,
I don't remember it very well.
That's another. Okay, I can't remember the actual name of the series, but the first one is Prince of Thorns, second one's King of Thorns, and the third one's Emperor of Thorns.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was a series that got recommended to us from someone that we knew.
I thought it was recommended by you to me.
No, it was
that's
Bobby.
Just kind of how it works.
Bobby recommended it to me.
It trickles down, man. You never know where
it's
really coming from.
So I read it, and I don't know how you guys felt about it, but if The Lies of Locke Lamora is a book about a bad guy who's kind of nice, The Prince of Thorns is not that. It is about a bad guy who's a bad guy.
Yeah, no, the main character is just a straight up D-I-C-K.
It's just a matter of the fact that everyone he fights, that's a big deal to fight, is just worse than him.
Yeah.
Which is difficult because he's a bad guy.
Yeah. He's a pretty big POS.
The book starts off with a graphic warning here. Like the book starts with rape and pillage.
Oh yeah. This is definitely not This is a very mature series of books.
We seem to have started off with a dark tone here with these two series.
Well, I mean,
they're pretty dang good.
I was trying to think of books that we've all read, and I know that you read that one because when I read it, I know how you feel about the heel side of things. Like sometimes
I like how you said it like that. The heel
sometimes
side, the bad guy.
you prefer the heel not just because of them being a bad guy, but the way they portray being said.
Yeah,
bad guy.
I like stories where it's the bad guy trying to like convince the reader that he's not the bad guy.
Right. Except in the Thorns, he doesn't
That's
do
not
that.
what that is. Yeah,
he's
not at all.
He's not
just the bad guy through and through.
He doesn't try to convince anyone that he's a good guy. He just is a bad guy.
And
that happens to be killing people that are worse than him.
And I will
by some margin.
I'll just say, right now that because it's not like that actually. I don't like the main character.
Oh, he's terrible.
But I continued to read because I was like, what is this POS going to do next?
Yeah. Right. So the world itself is also really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which I don't think we should get into the world because it's a lot of spoilers.
Agreed.
Because it's a very interesting thing how they made that world.
Right. Is that the one where it's like they fight with swords and armor, but if you really look at deep, it's
see, we can't explain it because
we can't explain it at all because it just gives it away.
Well, it gives it gives a lot of the background.
So if that intrigued you at all,
but
go ahead.
If you want to read about someone who is a complete d-bag.
Yeah. Do we want to try to look up? We want to try to look up that series author.
Prince of Thorns. I'll start there. And,
so we're gonna look up the author and stuff for you. So if you guys do,
Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence.
Does it have a name of the series?
That's what I'm trying to find. Followed by
series name. I mean, this way you guys are not
the Broken Empire trilogy.
That's what it was. The Broken Empire.
We already named the 3 books: Prince of Thorns, King of Thorns, Emperor of Thorns.
Right. So I mean, like I said, I was just trying to think of books that we've all read. Like the 3 of us have read the entire series.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of reminded me of Song of Ice and Fire, except no one pretends to be a good guy.
Right.
Right.
There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in that book, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm normally one of I like a true hero in my books, but
I do always appreciate an actual hero. I appreciate heroes that go through struggles.
Right.
So
we can move on to the next series if you want to bring up somebody.
I think you know who I'm going to bring up.
Yeah, but I wanted to leave him for a little later.
Okay, I mean we can do that, but I was just going to use him as an example. We could skip over that for now.
How consistent.
Yeah.
But What?
Go.
What are you talking? What? Quit making noises over there.
Yeah, there was silence.
There was no silence.
Honestly, I'm trying to.
Anyway, so
collect his thoughts.
let's do another set of series that I know we've all read.
Yeah.
I know it was also a movie, so it could have been brought up in our books versus movies, but we're not going to talk.
If I remember correctly, I don't think it was.
It was not, but we're not going to talk about the movies. We're going to stay strictly to the books on this one because this is just books. But the Hunger Games series.
Hunger Games series, and you know what? Yeah. Now that you just mentioned that, and I think it's another series we didn't talk about that I know you and I have read. We should talk about the Maze Runner series when we're done with the Hunger Games.
Oh, the Maze Runner series was really good too. I mean,
but anyway,
it got kind of weird towards the end, but at least the first book was really good. But the Hunger Games series, to me, it was just random book series that Tim said you need to read this book. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, and then he's like. The third book's a little hard to read, but once you get to where somebody loses their legs, shit gets real.
I actually said the name of the character, and I can't remember his name right now. But I was like, so and so turns a corner and shit gets real.
Right.
And that whole series just kind of upset me. The more and more books that existed.
Why is that?
Why is that?
I just didn't like it. I didn't like it.
Can you describe why?
Well. They had the first Hunger Games, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I get that. But then they had another Hunger Games. Right after that, main character does it again.
Well,
that's kind of stupid.
So here's the thing. You gotta realize, you gotta read the books to understand.
I have.
That the reason why she had to do it twice is because the way she ended the game the first time, the rules were broken.
Well,
so
there aren't any rules.
If you recall, when we were talking about the
status quo was broken.
When we were talking about anime, what no one brought up was the fact that anime does like to use what we call contrived plots, which are just plots that are assembled solely for the sake of getting characters into the right position. Mm-hmm. You could view the Hunger Games as having a contrived plot after the first book, but they at least set up why it exists. So, you don't have two people winning Hunger Games, which is why at the end of the first one, when you have that happen, it pisses off the president, and he comes up with this whole contrived plot, essentially, to get her back into the game to try and kill her.
Right, and it just happened to be on their 75th Hunger Games, so they were doing that.
He had all these excuses. He was just trying to make more and more excuses to try and get her dead.
But then the third book.
Well, then the third book doesn't have an actual Hunger Game. The third book's just a war.
Yeah,
third book is just to clean up
because they failed. It did. To kill her
and the third book was very hard for me to get through. So after our books versus movies, you guys all know in the world that I don't tend to read books. I listen to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Hunger Games was probably the last series that I actually read in physical form with an actual book.
Okay.
And most people that know me know that I have trouble reading anyway. Well, that third book was super hard for me to read. But the second it got to that point that Tim told me about, when somebody walked around the corner and they lose their legs, I couldn't put it down. Because that, seriously, it got real.
The third book takes off like a rocket after that point.
Yeah. It lost me for quite a bit, and then picked right back up, and I was like, okay, I'm okay.
I'm back in.
Now
I'm back in.
Know how this
Let's
ends.
finish this book.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I was reading the book, you know, I've always worked an early type shift. You know, I've done that for years now, but before I was in fast food and did random shifts. But when I was reading that book, I was in a different job where I had to be at work at like 7 a.m. And I was reading it, and I get to that point, and I'm like, I should put the book down and just finish this tomorrow. But I ended up staying up way later than I should have, and I was totally dragging butt the next day.
I did that
at work.
The first time I read the first Hunger Games, I don't read super fast. I read pretty slow. But I drilled the Hunger Games in about a day and a half, 2 days, which is saying something. And the way I did it was I literally stayed up all night and went to work without any sleep, and then continued reading at work.
Is this when you were still at the movie theater?
Yeah, that was when I was at the movie theater.
Once again, you talked about how, you don't typically sit and actually read through the books, and honestly, neither do I. Simply because I don't want to sacrifice the time to do that. But I've noticed whenever I actually do take that time and I sit down, I kind of get more into it, and it's to a point where I can't put it down as easily as I would if I was listening to an audiobook.
I think I'm like that with any new book or series. Even listening to it, I have to get past the first section, the first something. So there's always something in the beginning, and it'll be different lengths of time for different books.
Yeah, they gotta get you gotta get to I'm gonna use the musical terminology. You gotta get to the hook.
Yeah. No,
and to where they hook you in and drag you.
Some books have pretty late hooks.
Yeah, and there's a couple of book series that it's taken me a couple times to get through. The Sword of Shannara.
Don't know that one.
The Chronicles.
The Chronicles of Shannara.
Yeah.
They did a TV series on it, and I was like, well, the preview for the TV series looked good. Let me look at the books.
Mm-hmm.
I think I went through the first book, and the whole first book is so dull.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that when you.
I tried listening to that series. I tried listening to that series a couple different times. And then, this is another series we can talk about a little later too, but it was the Stormlight Archives.
Mm-hmm.
The Stormlight Archives, it took me almost 3 times to try to even get to a hook in the Stormlight.
And here's the thing, when we were talking about the Gentleman Bastards earlier, I said read the intro, because the intro is important.
Right.
Anything Brandon Sanderson has ever written, and he's the guy who wrote the Stormlight Archives, Mistborn, all the other stuff that's in his big series called the Cosmere. Almost every single one of his intros, I can't think of a single intro that you can't skip.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and you said that, I might get into Mistborn, but I tried after reading Stormlight. I tried to get into Mistborn and I couldn't do it.
Brandon Sanderson's intros are amazing the second time you read his books. The first time, because you understand what's going on in the intros and you can get extra information from them. But the first time you read them, the intros are just dead information. It's just a time suck.
We totally, we skipped Hunger Games altogether.
Right.
We didn't talk about anything.
We didn't talk about the plot or nothing.
Nothing. So
wanted to say,
let's circle back and actually, give people reasons to maybe want to try and read
the reason
Hunger Games.
For my opinion of it also might have to do with the fact that I haven't read this since I was in middle school.
Right.
No, I mean, I read a lot of things in middle school that I didn't have.
I don't remember it. I just remember I didn't like it.
I didn't like a lot of the stuff I read in middle school, because a lot of the stuff that I read in middle school I was made to read.
Right.
So I have a lot better feelings toward things like To Kill a Mockingbird than I did when I was in middle school, or Shane than I was when I was in middle school.
Yeah, there's probably some stuff that I could
Hunger
do to
Games
reread.
was a choice for me. And I liked the first book. I just remember I progressively liked them less as they went on.
And I feel that way about the series too.
I can understand that too.
Yeah, there's a couple of those series.
The first Hunger Games book is definitely the best one.
But honestly, I barely even remember the plot of the third at all.
Mm.
And
there's a war.
Yeah. Basically, there's a war. She ends up
Snow's a dick.
Yeah, there's a. She ends up going out of District 12, and they end up discovering that District 13 is real, and and she ends up as part of their army, and but she's still mentally messed up in the third book. So you're not only having to go through the boringness of getting prepped for a war, you got to go through the boringness of her going through her own head.
Yeah,
Katniss going through her own head to try to fix her. I mean, because she lost a lot of people
over the series.
And the thing is, it's also...
just in the second book alone, she lost a ton of people.
The second book was just the beginning of, just blood spilled all over.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, in the first one, there's just a bunch of random people in the Hunger Games. Let's talk about the plot here. So, what is the Hunger Games? All this, we gotta hook our listeners into
the concept of the Hunger Games is it's future United States. there has been some kind of great devastation. Seems like nuclear war to me.
Yeah.
Right.
So you still have America, and it's now an empire broken into 12 districts and the capital. It used to be 13 districts and a capital. But
at this point, when you go, District 13 is just a myth.
Right.
Yeah, nobody knows if it's for real or not.
No one knows if it still exists. It is, historically, it was a thing, but everyone thinks it was destroyed, which they use in their propaganda.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the capital keeps, a foot on everyone's throat, basically, by having this thing called the Hunger Games, which is each district puts up a boy and a girl that are kids, basically, between the ages of, between 12 and 18?
Yeah, tributes is what they're called.
Yeah, the tributes, and they submit them all to a free-for-all,
but
one person lives through this whole thing.
You got to give the reason why they hold these Hunger Games. The reason was the capital blames the other districts for the war and why the capital ended up winning.
District 13 tried to initiate a war with the capital. District 13 was destroyed, and to make sure all the other districts stayed in line and show that the capital really is in charge, they implement this thing called the Hunger Games.
Yeah, right. So they are basically forcing them to give up 1 or 2 tributes per district in what they call the Hunger Games. Yeah, so they put so there's 12 districts, so there's 24 kids, and they are kids, in a battle arena, basically, a virtual style battle arena, and they fight to the death. And there's one winner, and so that one winner becomes...
It is, again, the future, so there is a lot of high tech.
Yes.
But the high tech is reserved for the rich people.
Right. Yeah. So you don't see the high tech in the outer districts so much. Some of the low number districts do see it.
Yeah. So there's kind of like a hierarchy in the districts of
because the different districts produce different things.
Yes.
Remind me again which district the main character's from. Is
I think
11?
She's from
12.
Yeah, she's from 12, and their main export is coal.
So basically, she's the poor girl from the poor district.
Right, she is the poor for the poor district.
Yeah, her dad died in a mining accident.
I want to say District 5 is like agriculture because that's where what's her name comes from the first book.
I think so, and like District 4 is like the Oceanic district because the guy with the trident in the second book.
Right, and then District 3 I want to say is the. Or District 1 or 2 is where the main, military force for the capital comes from. And so they're trained at a young age to be militaristic.
So the majority of the winners of the Hunger Games come from Districts 1 and 2.
1 and 2, yes. So, I mean, they talk about that quite a bit throughout, especially the training, because you get chosen and then you get some training before going in, so they bring you to the capital. You do some training.
Yeah,
they figure out what you're good at.
Honestly, the capital kind of looks at you in a way of marketability almost.
Oh yeah,
yeah. You're entertainment. You're basically modern gladiators.
So they got to make you entertaining
because they televise it. So
they treat it like a big sporting event. It's basically
the Super Bowl.
It's the Super Bowl.
Right.
It happens once a year. It's a big sporting event. You got promotion and advertisement, and you try and get sponsors. And
you get the sponsors during the games. If you're able to get a sponsor by something you've done, they can send you stuff in the games that may help you out.
They can send you food, medicine, weapons,
whatever. So the one big thing though is during the training they figure out what you're good at. So Katniss is good with the bow. They figure that out early in the training. So there will be a bow there. So she just has to fight to go get it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that basically, I think that's a pretty good description of kind of what it is.
So that's just the first one, and then the second one just elaborates more on the story, and the third one elaborates more on the story of Panem.
Yeah.
Panem is what they call the country or whatever.
Yeah, the empire.
The empire that the capital runs. So, if you haven't read the book, I do recommend you at least get through the first book. second book has a lot of the background story.
You could probably only if you only read the first book, it is a pretty well encompassed story by itself.
Yeah, you can finish off at the end of the first book.
It's just, if you only read the first book, the evil whatever country is still in power, but who cares? She
yeah,
it has a good ending. Yeah.
The heroine wins. Blah blah blah.
Anyways.
So that's another series, like I said, that we had discussed that we had all read. Mm-hmm. I think there's one more series that I can think of off the top of my head, but it may not be something you remember a whole lot of, but I'm pretty sure you read it, which is the Outlaw Chronicles. That's the King Arthur.
Yeah!
The Warlord Chronicles.
Warlord Chronicles.
The Warlord,
right.
the Outlaw Chronicles.
I tried reading the Outlaw Chronicles because that's the one about Robin Hood.
But the Warlord Chronicles, I'm sorry, I apologize, but no, yeah, you're right.
The Warlord Chronicles was great because I love that crap anyways.
It's basically about King Arthur, but not directly through King Arthur's eyes. So you are actually seeing the whole story of, I shouldn't say the story, a story of King Arthur.
Yeah, it's not the story, definitely not.
Through one of his warlord's eyes.
Yeah.
Dervil,
Kadern or something.
I used to love in the audio book the way they say his name through certain characters was just like endlessly entertaining.
Yeah, because that
like
little
Dervil,
like Merlin's apprentice. Merlin's apprentice. She's definitely Irish.
Super Irish.
So when she says it in that Irish,
Dervil Kadern.
Yeah, it was great.
So. Anyway, so
it's an interesting take on the Arthurian myth. If anyone who is really into Arthurian myth, and especially like old school Arthurian myth, is probably not for you. Right. It takes more of the modern Arthurian myth and changes it up. Yeah. Right. So for anyone who is like dead set against like Lancelot existing, well, he's in the book. Things like that. Things that irked me, because I like a lot of old school Arthurian myth. And they take certain things and they just make them unimportant and take Lancelot and stuck him in the middle of the book, and it irked me.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's a really long series. It's 3 books. I only bring it up because I know you just read it within the last year or so.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read it, but I know that I got Devin to read it because I know he's into that kind of stuff, and I was like, hey, give this a shot. Yeah. Because it's not through Arthur's eyes, it's through one of his warlords, which gives it a completely different...
I think for me, there were certain, like, I didn't rush through it.
Right.
Which I was like, man, am I really going to continue to, to enjoy this? And, like, what made it enjoyable for me is the fact that it wasn't from Arthur's eyes. It was through Dervil's eyes. And, like, so he's writing this at a point where everything's already happened. And I'm sitting here, like, the whole time is like, how do we get here? How does it get to this point? Because like, there's certain parts about where he is, and while he's writing this, where you're just like, how did this happen?
Right. When you start off, he is an old man who is a monk in a monastery.
Yes.
Which is the opposite of what he is.
And he's writing this story for the princess, who wants to know more about everything that's going on, the truth behind a lot of the myths and legends that she's heard. And I think they go over the fact that he's missing a hand pretty early.
Yeah.
And so you're just like, how is this guy who's missing a hand and is a monk, how did he go through all this stuff?
They slowly trickle details to you where you're just like, okay, I gotta keep reading so I can know how that happened.
Right.
But they do discuss how he loses his hand and how he learns to fight without it.
When we say it's Arthurian myth, don't expect Arthur to be there from the beginning. So I was told it was a retake on Arthurian myth, so I expected Arthur to show up soon. He doesn't show up soon. He shows up more than halfway through the first book.
Right. It takes a while.
It's even when he does show up, it's not like spotlight on this guy immediately kind of thing. It's like it's a slow. It's kind of pot.
Like the princess asks Dervil, what did you know about Arthur and what happened and things, and he's like, well, if you want to know what happened, you got to know more about me. So he goes over a lot of his life,
right,
from when he was a kid, how he grew up, how he became a good fighter, and then once he was already a decently renowned fighter, then he met Arthur and they became friends.
Right. Yeah. Which is, again, I randomly came across this book while looking for audiobooks for something to read. And I'm like, and it just caught my attention. So I found all 3 books, I downloaded them, and I'm like, I'll get to this in a minute. Finished what I was reading at the time, and I just started it. Mm-hmm. And it just, I mean, I didn't go into it with any expectations about learning more about the Arthurian myth. I know a little bit about a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't know a lot about a lot, but I like that whole round table and sword in the stone and that kind of cool mythology of what Arthur is.
Bernard Cornwell is the guy who wrote the book.
Right.
I don't know how much he knows about Arthurian myth. If I were to take a guess, I would say he probably knows as much as most people know about the Arthurian myth.
I listened to an interview with him only because I was curious. I think it had something to do with just asking him where he got a lot of his information from. He did do some research, but he kind of pick and chose what he wanted to put in his book.
Right. Which is because I was kind of excited to see his take on some of the classic Arthurian myth stories, but he never got into any of them. So if you're expecting him to go over the Fisher King or anything, anything like that. Anything with the other knights or anything, he doesn't go over.
It's him just writing his own Arthurian,
right? My big thing that I really enjoyed out of it was Merlin. Yes, Merlin's in the story, but Merlin is not this huge great magician or sorcerer.
Especially in the first 2 books, all of the magic that he does, quote unquote, could literally just be coincidence.
Right, absolutely. He's a druid. So they don't say it straight up in the books, but those of us who know a little bit the whole what things are and classes of people, he's a druid. He asks nature to
do things,
bend to his will. Yeah. So a lot of what he does in the first book is he wants to create fog. So he does this whole big thing to create fog or mist, and it could just be coincidence that this mist came about.
Because he says, I casted the spell, now all we have to do is wait. And then several hours later, there's fog.
Yeah.
Right. It could just literally be a coincidence that there was fog.
Right.
But the way they go over a lot of the magic in the books, and a lot of people take all this magic stuff seriously. If you don't believe in magic, you just see a bunch of weird people. Yeah. A bunch of weird people jumping around on one foot, shaking bones in the air.
Yeah, because that's what they're doing.
Because that's literally what they're doing. They're smearing themselves with excrement and popping around, saying weird things.
It's like if somebody does a rain dance for an entire day, and then it just so happens to rain the next day.
And you can tell there's a lot of superstition involved. So God, what was it, the death wall or whatever, where they stick a skull on a post or something, and they say that this is a wall and no one can pass it. And the thing is, no one tries to pass it, so you don't know if they could or not. It could just be superstition, and then the enemy druids will come over and they'll piss on it or something. And if they're brave enough, and then they'll say the curse has been broken, we can pass the wall.
Yeah.
It could literally just be a bunch of BS.
Right. And it could just be the beliefs of who's there. Since it's a druid on a druid, so the druid says there's a spell there, but we can't cross.
And they even go
over to gas each other up about it.
They even go over
some put a spell down. What can I do?
They go over some of what was it, the Black Shield Irish, and they pass by the death walls or whatever. And everyone's just like, well, that's because they don't abide by or something, and they have weird. And it's like,
really, they just don't.
Their society just doesn't care.
Right.
I remember that. That was hilarious.
Yeah, but so I mean, again, I'm just trying to bring up books that we've all kind of read. So that was just another series.
I think forgot about every single one of these that we talked about.
I think I'm out of books that I can think of that we've all read. That we haven't already discussed, in previous.
Well,
so because we've discussed a lot of things in previous, we've talked about Harry Potter, obviously. We talked about Star Wars books. I discussed
we did
things like Stormlight, and we talked about Kingkiller.
We did very briefly, which I do want to get more into Kingkiller.
About the inheritance cycle.
Yes, we did.
Yes. But I do want to talk about a series. I know you started and never really got past the fourth book. No, never got past the fourth book.
Oh, Dresden.
Yeah. So this is something me and Tim completely enjoy, and I enjoyed it.
I just lost momentum.
I'm so looking forward to the next book.
You need to try and start rolling that boulder back down the hill, because the Dresden Files, all it does is ever get better.
If nobody knows, you guys kept telling me, with where I left it at is, wow, really? You gave up right before it gets really good.
Right, you're cresting that hill, man.
You are. You're cresting that hill. It had already been months and months. I'm like, what? So do I restart or do I jump back in?
No, you just jump right back in.
Just jump right back in. So here's the thing: is that when Butcher started, Jim Butcher is the author of the Dresden Files. When he first started writing,
he looks like Rob Zombie.
When he first started writing, you can tell in the first about 4 books of the Dresden Files, he's still learning his style of writing.
Yeah, because it's very noir-ish.
Right. So he has his moments where he's can't quite put forth what he's looking for, or it's just
here's
very little descriptors.
Here's how I would describe the book to someone. It's a noir detective book, but set in modern day Chicago, and your detective is a wizard.
No, that's exactly how
That's exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
That's my understanding of it on the first 4
books. The thing is that's really cool about the book series themselves is that as he writes new books for the series of Dresden, you can see the technology around him growing with the times of when he wrote
them. When I say modern day, I mean the first book takes place in the year it was written.
Right, and I forget what year. It was in the 90s, right?
Yeah, it was in the 90s. So and he wrote a book a year for a while.
Right.
And so he literally did real time. So it would be a year between the first book and the second book, a year between the second book and the third book.
And they're not very long. At least the
first couple books aren't very long.
Yeah, so 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah. And so he does real time. So it's been that number of years in universe in the Dresden Files as it has been here. Now he did defy that a little bit in a couple of the books, but essentially they might be 6 months behind.
Right. But I mean, the thing that I really like about his books is that when he finishes a book and then starts a new book, going from one book to the next, he'll tell you roughly how much time has happened.
Yeah.
From what happened at the end of the first book and where this second book is starting. So it gives you an idea of time.
Yeah.
How long you're actually in this world.
But also, the world gets bigger and bigger the further you get along.
Yeah,
so does. the first few books especially, they feel very much like noir books, where
he's just in Chicago.
For anyone who's ever read a noir book or seen a noir film, the thing that the detective is after is generally what we call a MacGuffin. Mm-hmm. Which is a term that was coined back during the time of filming a lot of the noir films. The thing that they're after could literally be anything, and it serves basically no purpose other than to be desired by whoever wants it.
Right.
So a lot of noir books and movies didn't have big overarching things, so you could have the same character from one to the next, and they're just doing the same thing over and over again, essentially. And the first couple of Dresden Files books function a lot like that.
That's how,
it's a simple, self-contained story, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything else.
And they just keep repeating.
Right.
And for
then
me, that's kind of what had me losing momentum, because I could tell even, reading the fourth book, the world was expanding a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what was okay, they're changing a lot of shit.
Right.
The way that the story is going.
Yeah, after the book where you finished off on, he really starts to expand the world.
And when he starts writing the books that start connecting all the way back to the first book, and you're starting there comes a point where you read through the Dresden Files. If you read through it fast enough, you start mixing up the books because they interconnect so much at some points.
Yeah.
So instead of it just being small stories that are self-contained, it starts being this giant overarching plot.
So I mean, beyond the plot lines and everything else, what's great about this book is that Dresden, Harry Dresden, is not your typical I'm a BA hero. Yeah. He fails more times than he succeeds.
He's like a semi-competent.
I mean, like, he is very powerful, and he says that, and everybody says that. He has all this power, and he's not sure where it all came from. He learns that more and more as he goes out through this thing. But he has all this raw power as a wizard. And yes, he is a wizard. As a wizard, but he has not quite learned how to focus it. Like, he has to focus most of his spells through objects.
So
he has
I think he
and
says
a staff and
he
his
says
blasting rod.
in one of the books that in terms of raw power, he's among the upper echelon in the world for wizards.
Right.
But the problem is he goes over a lot of the fact that focusing your power is how wizards, show off and how powerful they are.
Right.
So focusing on small things is a more difficult task, and he doesn't have as much time and experience.
Because he's relatively young as a wizard. I mean, he's in his
30s or 40s, and wizards age super slowly in this world. So, his mentor is 100
plus
50 something or something like that. And he's a super old guy. And some of the wizards are just ridiculously old. Like they never go over like Ancient Mai. They never say how old she is, but it's implied that she's excessively old.
Right, because she is super powerful. I mean, like, they make that comment when he goes has to rip a hole to go into the fairy world.
The Never Never.
The Never Never. Where, like, if he does it, I mean, he just does it with brute force and just rips a hole.
Yeah.
And then he's talking about somebody else who opens a portal into the Never Never, and it's just, like, effortless.
Yeah, they use almost no power. It's just the matter that they can focus it so much better than you can.
And the only way Dresden can get in is if he just brute forces his way through it.
Yeah.
So I mean, Dresden is not the perfect.
In the first 100 episodes.
He's not. He's not a perfect.
Way through everything.
He's not a perfect hero. He messes up. Sometimes he's brain dead as all hell and can't like figure out the most simple hints, and when he finds clues, he can't always put clues together.
But he is also in world a trained detective.
Yes.
So he was trained by a private investigator. So he rents himself out as a private investigator or as a wizard. He has himself in the phone book as a wizard.
Yeah.
And people will literally call him and do prank calls because they don't believe him.
Well, and then he gets those people that...
Because this is not a world where magic is open and everyone knows it exists.
Right.
People make fun of him for saying he's a wizard.
Right. Yeah.
They think he's a charlatan.
And then there are people who will call him and say, I heard you can find lost objects. I lost my keys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has to do a quick little finding spell and finds that
he ends up getting a lot of the most desperate of desperate people who literally turn to everyone else and they go, I might as well try the wizard.
Yeah, because nobody else can...
That's definitely how it is at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, I mean, the way his whole story unfolds from the book 1 through book 15, I think, is where we are now.
I think so, yeah.
Is just, to me, phenomenal. Like,
and I literally cannot wait for the next book.
I've read through it 2 or 3 times, all 15 books, which is a lot of books, trust me.
Yeah.
But, like, even the 3rd time through, I'm still finding stuff that I missed that connected from the first book to the 8th or 9th book.
Where I jump, what I do.
What, restart?
Yeah, I might just restart and go through it.
It's a long. I'm telling you though, but it's a commitment. So
if you get through the first, I'd say 5 or 6 books, and it's not for you, I know that's a big commitment. 5 or 6 books.
So let's get into
very long.
Let's get into
the first ones, especially aren't very long.
Let's get into a little bit of the world so that we can draw people in. So yes, he's a wizard, but there's also other things in there. There's fairy. You got the fairy world, the Never Never. You also have a couple different types of vampires. There's 3, 4 different types.
Well, there's 4 different types that they've talked about so far.
The red, the black, the red court, the black court, the white court,
and then the jade court. But they haven't gone over what the jade court is or what exactly they do.
Yeah, it's just a brief mention. I mean, you don't get it in the actual stories, but if you read the short stories, there's Bigfoot.
Yeah. Bigfoot shows up a lot in the short stories.
There's also all kinds of other things. Like anyone
who's into Cthulhu lore.
Yeah.
In the newer stories, the newer books, they're going over a lot of those guys that are trying to take over from the sea.
Right.
They're basically Cthulhuites. They're basically working for the Great Old Ones.
Right. I mean, he ends up with a dog that's a foo dog. It's a temple dog. A temple guardian.
Yeah.
Mouse.
Yeah, I forgot all about that. Oh my god.
When he first gets this puppy, it fits in the pocket of his coat.
And then they have the
next book is an enormous dog. It is like a bull mastiff.
Are they the knights that
Knights of the Cross?
The Knights of the Cross. They are actually there's 3 of them, and they all have swords made from the nails that held Christ on the cross.
Cool. Yeah. Knights of the Cross. Okay, yeah. I get it.
So and one of the swords may or may not be Excalibur. They're kind of iffy about whether or not it is.
They keep alluding. They allude that it was once Excalibur, and it's like the only one that has never changed its form.
Yeah, because the other 2, one of them's a katana and the other one's a saber, and they talk about how the swords themselves, on occasion, will change. They'll take the nail itself out.
I remember them talking.
Yeah, they'll take the nail itself out and they'll put it in a different sword, or the sword will break under certain circumstances.
They'll put it into a different form to allow the
user
knight, the knight that uses it to use it in their ability.
I'm really impressed of how much I kind of vaguely remember this stuff, because it's been at least 5 years.
I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are.
But they go over demons. They go over a lot of different kinds of demons.
Yes, different types of demons.
Some demons are like the way they define
ghouls.
The way they define demons are just things from the Never Never that aren't fairies. Initially, but they also go over things that are like true demons, like fallen angel demons.
Right. Well, yeah, because then you have to deal with what's his name? Nicodemus, who is an actual true fallen angel.
Yeah. Well, he's not, but he's possessed by one.
He's possessed by a fallen angel, and so that has a whole story behind it too, with the coins.
Yeah.
And then at one point, spoiler alert, Dresden gets a hold of one of the coins.
Yeah, and that is awesome.
That becomes a whole storyline in itself that lasts a few books, and still...
Yeah.
It's still, at the end of 15, you still have a part of that there.
Well, you're going to have it at the beginning of the next book, too.
Right. So, I mean... And then you have... Oh, Bob. Don't forget Bob. Yeah. Bob is one of the funniest characters in the book series, because he is a perverted ghost that lives in a skull.
So he's not an actual ghost.
I remember Bob.
Yeah, I remember Bob. He's not an actual ghost. He is a spirit of air.
Right.
So he was never actually a person.
I thought he was a person.
No, he goes over this several times. He gets really mad when people say that he used to be a person or that he's a ghost. He's like, I was never one of you soft meatbag humans.
I remember him saying that.
Right? Yep. And everyone's always like, then why are you so fascinated with naked women? And he's just like, I just appreciate aesthetics.
So yeah, seriously, I mean, I just want to tell everybody to read the series. Because it's a very long series. Even if you grab a couple books here and there, you don't have to burn through them right away. Just that, to me, it's one of the most fascinating series I've ever read in my entire lifetime. And it is a long series. And this is coming from a guy who loves The Inheritance, loves Harry Potter. You know, those are great. But this one just has its own fascination.
Yeah, it's kind of like we said the same thing about Gentlemen Bastards.
Right.
You know, and I said that's my favorite book series, you know, right. And I've read Harry Potter like too many times to count.
Right.
You know? But
anyway, So leading in the same direction, I know. For those of you who have actually read this series, I know it was written for
here's the thing.
Preteen girls.
I started reading this next series after reading the Dresden Files because I think it was Goodreads actually recommended it to me. But the thing is, I'd already heard of it because when I worked at the movie theater, I was talking to the guy who recommended Dresden Files to me originally, and he was talking to our head projectionist and this other guy about another series that the head projectionist he already had read the Dresden Files, and he was like, well, try the Mercy Thompson series. It's a similar series, except instead of being a wizard, she's a shape-shifting coyote, and instead of being a detective,
same thing, right?
Instead of being a detective, she's a mechanic, but she has to go through a lot of the detective stuff because her life is just weird.
Her life is and she's a Native American shapeshifter that her true father was technically, but they'll say that he was not Coyote, but he was just Coyote pretending to be somebody else.
But that's a spoiler. That's a way late spoiler.
Whatever.
But
she can shift from human to Coyote instantly. But she ends up being raised by a pack of werewolves.
Yeah, but this is also, it's a slightly different kind of world, because in Dresden, no one knows about magic. They all deny it. They all say it's fraud and, fake. But in Mercy, the fairies, the Fae, have come out of hiding. Everyone knows they exist, and they have known since the 80s. So everyone knows that there are Fae, that there are goblins, that there are, trolls and things like that, elves. Everyone knows that they exist, and the first Mercy Thompson book kind of comes up on the precipice of when the werewolves are deciding whether or not they want to come out and tell everyone they exist too. But on top of there being Fae and werewolves, there's also vampires, witches, a bunch of other things that regular humans don't know exist.
Right, and then the werewolves do end up coming out later, but that's part of a storyline. But yeah, the Fae are the only magical style type beings that are out. So the Fae are out, and they have their own lands, and they become important later on in the book series. But truthfully, like I said, what's really weird about it is these books were technically written for preteen girls.
Yeah, they're technically supposed to be like young adult type things. They're like for anyone who read like the Sookie Stackhouse books, which is what True Blood is based off of, it's sort of, they were written in sort of the same vein. Like the True Blood TV show may not seem like it was written for teenage girls, but the Sookie Stackhouse books kind of were. They were just as violent, but they don't really go into it. But the Mercy Thompson books are sort of the same thing. Right. There are some instances of heavy violence. There are some instances of not so teen friendly escapades with no clothes on. But
yeah, because Mercy's naked quite a bit.
Well, they're all naked quite a bit because
when you shapeshift, that is teen friendly though, because it's like that's like the point in a person's life where they're kind of like discovering that.
Look, the last thing I need is teen girls being sexy around me, because that's just a gateway to trouble.
Okay, fair enough. What I'm saying is like they're still the subject matter still relates to teens everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. It's a thing that gets them interested. This is for sure.
Yeah.
But especially in a written medium, as opposed to like True Blood being a visual medium, you see a lot less of it. So
you just hear about it.
You just hear about it.
So when Mercy when she's able to shift,
the Mercy Thompson books,
her clothes don't shift, but she does. So she shifts in clothes.
She takes her clothes off a lot because she doesn't want to get tangled in her clothes. Which she does shift in her clothes on occasion, and she makes a big deal about the fact that she has to figure out a way to not trip over her own shirt.
Or her bra.
Or her pants, or whatever. So she takes her clothes off to make shifting easier.
Right.
Werewolves also do, but that's mostly so they don't tear through their clothes.
Right,
because werewolves are bigger and stronger, and clothes are not as big of a hindrance. But you know, they'd like to have something to put back on.
But they also, and the thing is,
that coyotes.
What I like,
dog, werewolf's a huge dog.
The coyotes are actually kind of small dogs.
Yeah, what I like
medium
about
to small, like dachshunds-ish.
What I like about the series,
I've seen some pretty damn big coyotes.
Well, there are different breeds of coyotes. There's like hundreds of breeds of coyotes. Some of them are really tiny, and some of
the ones around here are pretty enormous.
Yeah, I could probably punch a lot of them in the mouth and make them go away. But
yeah, well, the size and aggression are different things.
Right. They do a pretty good job in this series when they talk about like just the minor details that most people don't think about when you have to shape shift and they do talk about how a wolf and a person are separate but have to coexist together.
And they talk about that a lot in the other series that Patricia Briggs, who writes Mercy Thompson,
the Alpha and Omega.
Alpha and Omega goes a lot more into the duality of wolf and person.
Right.
Because Charles has the biggest duality of wolf and person because he was born a werewolf, which in this world, he's the only one who's ever been born a werewolf.
See, I didn't know that.
So in his head,
to read that series.
Yeah, you do. In his head, his wolf, who he actually has a name, he calls him Brother Wolf. And Charles are separate entities. They talk to each other a lot.
Yeah.
And they used to not talk with words. They used to talk with things like sense and feelings and images and things like that. But when he finds his mate, Anna, and she has issues talking to Brother Wolf using just sense and images and things like that, Brother Wolf starts to learn how to talk with words.
Oh, wow.
Because he's like, I want to communicate with my mate. And at first, he's like, oh, cute, we're doing baby talk. And then eventually, he's just like forming entire like paragraphs. And he's like, this is actually kind of useful.
Well, I mean, and they do talk about how, like...
But Mercy, on the other hand, doesn't have a duality.
She does not.
Like, her and the coyote are one.
Like,
so that's a big thing.
Like, they talk a lot about how Adam, which is the head of... the alpha of
the pack around
Mercy.
Yeah.
How he has to learn to control the wolf. So they talk about this a lot in the first couple books about how in control of not only, you know, the wolf, but his whole entire life. So he has to learn to control everything.
Yeah, and he has a very short temper. A lot of werewolves do.
Yes.
But a lot of them have come up with ways to sort of work around needing to be in control of things.
Yeah.
Which is another thing they go over in Alpha and Omega, which is how people learn to deal with their wolves. And most of the time, which is Adam's solution, the majority of the solution is just beat your wolf into submission.
Right.
So that it just doesn't take over.
And then they show that one part with Samuel where Samuel wanted to off himself.
And so a lot of the wolves are different also. The different wolves have different personalities. Samuel's wolf was a very caring and kind sort of wolf.
Yeah. And
when Samuel tried to kill himself, his wolf took over and was a wolf walking around in a human body.
Right.
For a little while.
To keep him from
killing himself.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, I mean seriously, if you've never heard of this series, the series is really good. But just realize when you're reading it, it's not geared for adults. It's definitely geared towards preteens or teens, young adults.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of good young adults.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of the time
Aragon is a good young adult book.
Right, absolutely.
Hunger Games is a good young adult book. Maze Runner, you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
The only difference,
which we're going to go into here in a minute.
Divergent even is.
Yeah, Divergent.
I like that.
I forgot that you've read that book.
The only real difference between a young adult book and a standard fiction book is vocabulary.
Yeah,
so
essentially.
The Mercy Thompson books use a pretty simplistic vocabulary. That's really about it.
Well, I only have like a few more that I could possibly talk about. I don't know if that would carry us to a whole nother episode.
I think we're just going to make this a longer podcast. There's a few more.
Wall here.
There's a few more book series that I'd like to talk about, but I don't think it'd be enough to run a whole nother.
Yeah.
If we go over them quickly, then I have a number of other series that I don't think Devin has read, but I think he should, and this might function as a decent list for him to get into some other stuff.
If you have a pretty long list, why don't we go ahead and cut this podcast. We'll do recommendations at the end of the second part. So we're going to go ahead and cut this part.
Are you sure you don't want to do recommendations based off of something we've already talked about?
I mean, my recommendation from this one and probably the next one, if we don't do them now, would be to read the Gentleman Bastard series. But if we're talking like we'll do recommendations in both episodes, then I'll start with read the Gentleman Bastard series, and I'll have a different one in the next
do you have
series.
a recommendation?
I would say read Mercy Thompson.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I mean,
or Dresden Files.
For me,
I would think you guys would.
I think between the two of us, one would do Mercy and the other do Dresden. So,
with Harrison, you got a recommendation other than Dr. Seuss?
Read Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. It's a book of poems. Milk and Honey by
Rupi Kaur.
A book of poems?
It's a book of poems.
Yeah, that's something we didn't really discuss. I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah, because we're a bunch of fantasy nerds. We talked about that instead of anything else.
No, that's good. Good job, Harrison. All right, so we're going to go ahead and call this podcast right here. So with that, I say talk at you later.
Later.